One of the top questions I get, and probably every single mortgage broker that's watching this, is should I pay my mortgage off early? Should I repay my mortgage early? Should I make additional repayments to my mortgage? I'm going to answer that question. And spoiler alert, it's probably a little bit anticlimactic because I answer this question all the time, and I think people get a little bit frustrated when I give them the definitive answer. Make sure you watch all the way to the end because I will be answering the question and giving some additional guidance on mortgages. So, should you repay your mortgage early? If you've talked to anyone that has repaid their mortgage, they will tell you it's one of the best things that they ever did. But today, I'm going to give you a balanced overview of the answer to the question, and you'll realize that you actually already know the answer because the answer is pretty obvious. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I've been in finance for over 30 years. I've done debt collection, wealth management, and lending. Why is that important? Because I'm going to give you a balanced view without my personal feelings. I'm just going to give you the pros and the cons. Today, we're talking and answering the questions, should I repay my mortgage early? So let's just start by saying, listen, as with anything with finance, there is not a one size fits all. It's always going to be dependent on your personal circumstances. That's why I'm not here to give financial advice, legal advice, or replace a conversation with a qualified professional who understands your specific circumstances and, more importantly, understands what your goals are in life for you and your family. So we'll go through the pros and the cons. So let's first start with the pros. So I always like to end with the cons because I want to leave you with the negative side of anything that maybe you think is all positive. So the first pro is peace of mind. Knowing that you're not paying a mortgage payment every month can be liberating. I know people that actually have parties when they make their last mortgage payment. So you do have that peace of mind. The other thing is increased cash flow. So the money you were paying out, you will now be able to use on other things. You might be able to save, etc. And lastly, it's low risk. And we're gonna look at a video now that's going to go through these and some other points, and then I'm gonna comment on my view of what's being said. I think sometimes hearing the same thing from different voices with different nuances is useful.
And before I get into numbers, I'll show you some numbers as we go through this today. But before I do, let's look at the broad pros and the broad cons, because there's two sides to every coin, of paying off your mortgage early. The pros are a guaranteed return, because you don't pay tax on saving money. The other pro is that that return is tax-free. There's the peace.
Now, both of those items, so a guaranteed return, obviously nothing in life is guaranteed. And also around the tax-free return, this is something that you'd want to speak to an accountant about. So it's not a layup, it's not in the bag, but broadly speaking, these are two benefits of paying off your mortgage early.
Of mind. Priceless, one could say. 80% of people who have no mortgage feel much happier than those others with mortgages. There is the increased cash flow earlier, because as soon as you've paid off the mortgage, the money you were paying on the mortgage is now available for lifestyle.
Now I'm going to talk about that. A lot of people talk about increased cash flow, and that's a really positive thing for some people. I remember during the crash of 2008, I had a neighbor who had a mortgage. And when they reduced the interest rate and his mortgage went down, so his monthly repayments went down, he had an increased cash flow. What do you think he did with that extra money? Did he save it? Did he make additional payments on his mortgage like a lot of people ask me? No. He went out and bought a Mercedes Benz. So you will see an increased cash flow. So you would have more money in your pocket. But you have to question, are you disciplined enough to manage that money wisely? So the increased cash flow is a pro, but it can also be a con.
And that means financial freedom that we talk about being available that much earlier. And there's minimal risk because the returns are all but guaranteed. Of course, interest rate risk exists, and if you're on a variable rate, they can change either up or down. But there's very little risk when you decide to repay a mortgage early or accelerate payments. But as I say,
Okay, so those are some of the pros. So you're going to have peace of mind. You're going to know that you don't have this huge repayment every month, or maybe your repayments weren't that high. You're going to have increased cash flow. So now instead of that money going to a bank every month out of your bank account from your salary, it is now staying in your bank account. Maybe. And there's low risk because if you've paid off your house to a degree, there is low risk because that money is now retained value in your home, which in 9 out of 10 cases, over the passing of time, property values are going to increase. So you might be thinking to yourself, this all sounds great. Why on earth would I not repay my mortgage early? Why would I not want the peace of mind, the relative low risk, the increased cash flow? As with everything, there are ups and there are downs to everything that you will do in finance. So one of the things that you have to think about is, let's just say you have an extra £50,000 to repay your mortgage, and you use that capital to repay your mortgage. You have to consider the opportunity cost. What if, 6 months from that, you had an opportunity to invest in a sound business? You lose that opportunity. What if there's some properties up north that, because of the renters' right reform bill, landlords are trying to get rid of on the cheap? So it's a great investment, and I'm not suggesting that or giving anyone investment advice, but just think about the opportunity cost. Not having that capital liquid available in your account, there is a risk to that. There's also less diversity. So if you put all of your money into your property, you're not spreading or mitigating the risk. So that means if there are any issues short term in the property market, all of your money is tied up in that property. And what will you realistically do with the money that you're saving? I gave a scenario about a real life experience where I had a neighbor who had the additional income or the additional capital because the repayments on his mortgage went down, and he went out and bought a Mercedes instead of saving that money, or instead of, diversifying or investing. So the thing is, realistically, are you disciplined enough to not have a mortgage payment each month? Are you disciplined enough to be able to do something wise with the income that is now staying in your bank account, as opposed to going out on a mortgage payment? So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at some additional downsides or cons to paying your mortgage early. As I said, there's upsides and downsides, and I just want to answer your question: should you repay your mortgage
and
early?
before I get into numbers, I'll show you who have no more available that much or need of exists,
Okay,
and if not,
so
repay
here
a
we go.
mortgage early or accelerate payments. But as I say, every coin has an opposite side. What are the cons? The cons include the opportunity cost. What else could you have done with the money? Could you have made more money from an investment return? Could you have got tax relief on that money by investing in a certain manner? The cons are the time value of money, as counterintuitive as it feels, guys. The longer you repay the capital on a mortgage over, the cheaper it is. If you think about paying $10,000 a year in capital over 20 years, the $10,000 you pay in year 20 hasn't got the same value as the $10,000 you paid in year 1, because time value of money has eroded. Inflation has eroded its value. And I suppose the last con is diversification. If you invest the money instead of accelerating the property payments. You're diversifying away from property into other investment assets.
So that's a great point. And again, there are cons or downsides to repaying your mortgage early. So there's an upside, there's a downside. And here's the simple answer: it all comes down to your appetite for risk, what you're trying to do in the long run, and what the other people on the mortgage actually want to do. So, the upside of repaying your mortgage early is that you're going to have that additional income flow each month. One of the downsides is with that additional income flow, you lose the ability to diversify. So you're going to need to speak to an accountant, speak to your family, and also decide emotionally which one is best for you. I had a client one time that she had about £60,000 in savings. She was looking to purchase her first home, and in going to purchase her first home, she was like, I have £60,000 as a deposit. When I looked at her credit report, she had about £20,000 in debt. Now, it was all being serviced well. She had never missed a payment. She didn't have a high debt to income ratio, relatively speaking. And what I said to her is, well, why don't you pay down or pay off the revolving credit and installment credit that you have? So she could have taken out of that £60,000 deposit that she had, she could have taken £20,000 and paid off one of or all of the different outgoings that she had. And what she told me is also the answer to the question of should you repay your mortgage. She said, I feel so much better knowing and seeing that that money is in my bank account, even though she was also aware of the fact that what she was paying on interest on servicing the outgoings and servicing the debt that she had, what she was paying out on interest was a lot lower, or a lot higher actually. The interest that she was paying on those loans was a lot higher than the interest that she was getting on the savings. So £60,000 to a lot of people will be a lot of money in savings. And for her, she was like, well, I have it. I can see it. I feel good. I know I can access it if I want to. And I'm getting little or nothing interest. I'm paying my credit cards and my loans well each month, and I'm paying out a high amount of interest. So what she felt and her emotion was overriding the math. As a mortgage broker, it's my job to just point the math out. But ultimately, your emotional drive or your personal circumstances will override quite often the math that is involved in the question, should I repay my mortgage early? Now, I hope that that has answered your question, and you probably knew the answer in the first place. You probably watched videos, you probably understand the pros and cons, but now you need to ask yourself emotionally, which one of those scenarios is best for you? I don't give financial advice and I don't give legal advice, and my videos are not designed to replace speaking to a qualified professional. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. And if you disagree with anything that I'm saying, or if you have a topic that you'd like for me to discuss, make sure you put that in the comments.